Some bad news. The good news is there is a place for you in heaven. The bad news is they want you tonight. Today's parable of the rich fool has a similar twist at the end. And it comes after a man said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the family inheritance with me." And it's summed up in Jesus' response to that man, where Jesus says, "Beware, be on your guard against every kind of greed." Jesus says, life is not measured by how much you own. Yet our society, our culture, works by creating for demand for things that we don't really need. The latest iPhone, smartwatch, Fitbit, trainers, TV, car. As Canon J. John said, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like. The 10th commandment says, do not covet your neighbour's house or anything else your neighbour owns. The word covet means to desire something that is not rightly yours. And the word we use for covet today is materialism. We are using up the earth's resources at an alarming rate, all to make ourselves feel better. If everyone on earth, that is all 8 billion of us, had the same standard of living as people in Bangladesh, there would be enough resources on this earth to sustain us all. If we all had the same standard of living as people in China, we would need not just one planet Earth, but a tenth of another planet as well to support us. If we all had the same standard of living as people in the United States, we would need 4 planet Earths to supply all the resources that we need. Clearly, we've only got one planet. We need to live simply that others may simply live. Martin Lewis's money-saving expert website has a very useful mantra which I try and remind myself of every time I'm thinking of buying something. And it's this: do I need it? Can I afford it? Will I use it? And if the answer is no to any of those, then don't buy it. Do I need it? Can I afford it? Will I use it? Now, back at the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, we hear that on the 7th day of creation, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Just before that, in verse 26, on the 6th day of creation, God says, "Let us make mankind in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." God has not given us this great privilege of ruling over creation to use it and abuse it, but to be stewards of it for future generations, to look after it with the same sacrificial love that God shows to us in Jesus. And Jesus' ministry reminds us that our responsibility is not just towards our families and friends, but to all, especially the vulnerable and marginalised. On the 13th of June, Sir David Attenborough addressed the world leaders at the G7 and warned that human beings could be on the verge of destabilising the entire planet. Targets were agreed, but many say they don't go far enough. And those targets will involve every one of us in making choices for the future. Most of us today are not directly involved in global energy policies or developing nuclear weapons or cutting down rainforests. But our activities, our overconsumption, what we buy, where we shop, how we use our resources and spend our money, these things really do affect our planet. In our gospel reading, the parable of the rich fool, we're reminded how we are called to work in partnership and not just for personal gain. The man in the parable is described as being rich before he has this bumper harvest. He finds that his land has produced an even greater yield than usual, and he decides he needs to decide what he's going to do with this surplus. And the way he goes about making this decision tells us a lot about his character. Who does he consult? Who does he talk to about this big decision? No one. Now, that would have seemed really, really strange in his culture, where they were not as individualistic as we are. So someone making a big decision would have discussed that with their family, with their workers, with the village. But instead, this rich man talks only to himself. He's not considering using what he has to serve God or to help other people, or even his family or his workers. His concerns are just for himself, so that he can say in verse 19, relax, eat, drink, be merry. And I'm sure that that way of thinking can appeal to all of us, and indeed, advertising suggests us that that's what we should all be doing. But the message of the parable is that that approach is misguided. The twist in the parable is that the rich fool is not going to enjoy any of it because his life is to end that very night. And God asks the man, and these things that you have prepared, whose will they be? The rich man was living a self-centered life without meaningful relationships with others or with God. He had benefited greatly from the riches of creation's produce, but he'd forgotten the others who were involved, including God. It's estimated this year that companies in the UK will spend £25 billion on advertising. They will be telling us that if we buy more of their products, we will be happier, more fulfilled, more comfortable. And they would not be spending that money if it did not affect us. The consequence of all this desire is the using up of the planet's resources, the destruction of our planet through pollution, climate change, and the extinction of various plants and animals. And what's worse, it's obviously a lie. By buying these products, they are not going to make us happier or fulfilled or more comfortable. In Paul Simon's song, Have a Good Time, he sarcastically portrays materialism with these words, and God bless the US of A, and God bless the standard of living, and let's keep it that way, and we'll all have a good time. I don't think so. But he also hints that deep down we know that's not right when he sings, maybe I'm laughing my way to disaster. Maybe my race has been run. Maybe I'm blind to the fate of mankind. But what can be done? What can be done? Well, let's hold on to Jesus' words for a start, where he says, beware, be on your guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. As we heard in Genesis, we've not been asked to rule over creation in order to use it and abuse it. rather to be stewards of it for future generations. Will there be something here for future generations? We are to look after it with the same sacrificial love that God shows us in Jesus. And Jesus demonstrates what that looks like in his ministry, working in partnership with God the Father, giving his time, his teaching, his love, and ultimately his life, so that everyone might be able to experience life in all its fullness, so that everyone might flourish, not just those that already have. So let's consider how we can use our gifts, our skills, our money, our time to work in partnership with God and each other, to nurture the potential of this world and all who live in it. And let's start today, because none of us know how long we have. As the angel said to the man, I've got some good news and some bad news.